Adishma mama wunyina ha Midday amma sapon kuma Jesse Sabre de yeboshi na yakọ abankese mu ye nyina ye ni atorenche to my Ghana ya amansoafo ebe se miensa asojafo ka ho nipa nwotwe konya ewiemhye akwanhia ebra na okọ asantema kodi dwuma no empanyifo yesi yenye nhwehwemu forensic audit ahodo mfamfa ho ni ehu de akwanhia ne baaye sese eje ebo eje nya bedru enti empanyifo de wom etudwa ye mohwe na yenkotie de ekoso ewo.
So, for the scope of flight, we looked at the history of the flight, we looked at the weather, we looked at the environment, we looked at the machine, that's the helicopter, we looked at human factors, the crew flying the plane. Then we looked at the organizational and systemic factors, sequence of events, and then we came to what we believed strongly was the cause of the accident. For the history of flight, we went before the flight to see what the pilots had been doing. And it's on record that their last 3 flights before the subject flight, the same crew had flown all the 3 flights before on the same helicopter. On the 2nd of August, they came from their base in Takoradi to Accra. It was a Medivac flight, 1 hour long. On the 3rd of August, the following day, they did a flight from Accra to Cape Coast back to Accra. 1 hour, 20 minutes. It was also a medical evacuation flight, Medivac. On the 4th, they were tasked to go fly Accra to Salman, back to Accra. That was a 2 hour 30 flight. That was a bullion flight, cargo flight. On the 5th of August, they rested. Now, it helps to say here that in Ghana Air Force, there are flying limitations for the crew. You have 10 hours per week maximum, 62 hours maximum per month. Before flight, it's also accepted that if you've had a rest of 8 hours, you've had enough rest and you can go to work. They had in excess of 24 hours rest. On Wednesday, 6th August, the crew for the Z9 aircraft, call sign, ISCAP, Hotel Romeo, India, planned to execute the task order for the Ministry of Defense. The flight was scheduled to depart at 8 a.m. with an estimated en route time of 50 minutes. The captain delayed the flight due to adverse weather in Accra, Kumasi, and Obuasi. The weather improved about an hour later. So, takeoff ended up at 12 minutes, 14 seconds after 9 a.m. The altitude changed to avoid low clouds. Now let me explain why this was so. The flight started out being conducted under visual flight rules. Now, if you're flying under visual flight rules, what it means is you're using visual references to navigate. It's a normal way of flying. So they were using visual cues to navigate to go to Obuasi. And so they had to stay away from cloud in contact with the ground. So as the cloud base changed, they changed their altitude. Where they needed to avoid, they would avoid. I'd like you to take a look at these 2 pictures. Now, first of all, these pictures were taken in the environs of where the accident took place. Take note, it wasn't taken on the day of the accident, but it's just representative. The picture on the left shows the morning weather and shows you same place, looking at the same area, and you can clearly see that you can make out the ridges in the terrain over there. And it's noteworthy that on the day of the flight, this visibility you are seeing that I'm telling you, you can't even see that as you can see. On the day, the visibility was much worse. From eyewitness accounts, the visibility was down to close to 200 meters at some point. This also shows a picture of actual weather from a passenger who was on board the aircraft, just to give you an idea. The weather in the southern Ghana was poor on the day, which delayed departure for about an hour. In Accra, conditions were misty, with visibility of about 5 to 7 kilometers and very low clouds, starting at only 700 to 1100 feet above the ground. While the situation improved slightly later in the morning, the early hours were dominated by haze and overcast skies. In Kumasi, the weather was worse, with drizzle reducing visibility to around 4 kilometers and heavy low clouds sitting just 600 to 900 feet above the ground. Only Accra and Kumasi Aerodrome were available. Only Accra and Kumasi Aerodrome weather were available. There was no formal information on the weather available to the pilots along the flight route. Witnesses reported poor visibility due to fog and rain at Brofuyedru and its environs. Environmental commissions in the Dampier Forest Reserve and its rugged terrain of hills, mountains, created conditions such that over such rugged terrain, you can have turbulence, downdraft, and other phenomena. Now, to look at this is what we're talking about. This is a known aviation phenomena when you have such rugged territory. And what ends up happening is turbulent wind currents occur usually around ridgelines, mountains, and hills, and can generate sink rates in excess of 1,000 feet a minute in moderate wind conditions. These sink conditions can often exist well above the barrier that induces the eddies. We assessed the aircraft to see if it was fit for purpose. The helicopter entered the Ghana Air Force Service in May 2015, having been manufactured in 2012. And it reached its 10-year service threshold on 18th May 2025. Aircrafts have periodic checks to make sure that they're fit for service. The Air Force has 25-hour checks, 50-hour checks, and 100-hour checks. The 10-year check for the helicopter is what was mandated for this helicopter. Now, as is usual, an operator, in this case Ghana Air Force, requested from the manufacturer an extension. And it's normal, happens in civil flying, happens with any type of flying. The manufacturer gave a 90-day extension to 18th August 2025. And basically, the helicopter met all the basic safety requirements. That notwithstanding, it sort of met a 100-hour check. So the Air Force also did a 100-hour check on the helicopter before the flight. The aircraft on the day, was declared serviceable and duly signed off by both the engineers and the captain. The flight data report indicates that the helicopter was in good working condition. The helicopter, however, did not have some avionic safety enhancements. As I said before, the aircraft was serviceable and airworthy. The additional safety equipment that the helicopter did not have were things like the helicopter terrain awareness system or the enhanced ground proximity warning system, as you may choose, advanced navigation with terrain mapping, an automatic flight control system. And I would say that these safety equipment would have enhanced situational awareness. For instance, it didn't have an autopilot. That's advanced, the automatic flight control system, so that the crew had to manually fly the plane. So it sort of increases workload. Typically, you want to have a plane that has an autopilot. All the civil planes use autopilots, and the workload on the pilots is very low. It gives you the chance to do things and to think easily, and so on and so forth. Despite all this, the aircraft was in a good condition to fly and met all safety requirements. The investigation has recommended strongly for aircraft with these additional safety enhancements to be acquired immediately for the Air Force. To rule out any potential human causes, we also examined the qualifications, experience, and competence of the crew. The captain has a postgraduate certificate in safety and accident investigation from Cranfield University, UK, in 2024. The captain was a qualified FAA, that's the Federal Aviation Administration, commercial and instrument rated pilot from Bristol Academy, Florida, USA, in April 2015, 10 years ago. Within the Ghana Air Force, he was recategorized in March 2025 as a Cat C pilot. That is, a pilot qualified to be a captain on the helicopter, the Z9 helicopter. And he had a green instrument rating. In the Air Force, they have gradings for pilots, categories for pilots from A to D. D being, depends on what you call high and low, D being for the initial, sort of, and then you go all the way to A. It's interesting to note that for quite a while, and as at now in the Air Force, the highest category is Cat C. So the pilot was totally competent to be flying this plane. The co-pilot was also a qualified FAA commercial and instrument rated pilot from Bristol Academy, Florida, and he qualified in April 2023. In December 2024, he was recategorized within the Ghana Air Force as a Category D pilot on helicopter type with a white instrument rating. To further rule out any potential human causes, we examined the medical and psychological records of the crew. A review of the medical and personal records revealed no known medical or psychological conditions in the captain, co-pilot, or technician at the time of flight. All three were described by witnesses as calm, prepared, and professional during the pre-flight activities. Fatigue or medication was not considered to have materially affected their performance on the day of flight. Now to the sequence of events. The flight departed Accra under visual flight rules in marginal weather. The flight to Brofuyedru was uneventful. Brofuyedru is approximately 90 miles from Accra, about 10 miles from Obuasi. As the flight approached Obuasi, visibility deteriorated rapidly due to mist and low clouds. At 9:56, the crew entered IMC, which is Instrument Meteorological Conditions. To the layman, it is they flew into clouds because they no longer could stay away from the clouds, so they flew into clouds and transitioned to IFR. Now, IFR is Instrument Flight Rules. So what it means is they now transitioned from navigating using visual cues to now navigation solely on the aircraft's instruments. The crew then initiated a climb to cross terrain that they were aware of. They initiated the climb to cross the terrain. Seconds before impact, the crew stated that they could see the high ground below, so they had gone over it. Suddenly thereafter, the helicopter that was flying up without any change in its power or in the pitch which we use to go up and down, suddenly lost height and impacted a ridgeline at about 1370 feet above sea level. And this was about 6.5 miles from the destination, and this happened at 9:58. Said all that. Is what the planned track had been. The purple line is what the aircraft actually flew, and that took place because it was avoiding clouds and so on and ended up where it was. Now to our findings. The helicopter was airworthy, but it lacked additional safety enhancements. For instance, the terrain awareness warning system. Now, you know, the terrain awareness warning system, for instance, is predictive. So what it does is it tells you, warns you, it gives you a better picture of the situation and puts the pilots in a better, it gives them, puts them in a position to make better judgments, to be able to see everything and be able to foretell if there are any things that could possibly create a problem. But they lack the additional safety enhancements required for the weather phenomenon over that terrain. There was adverse weather, there was limited visibility, there was rising rugged terrain, with this terrain induced complicating factors, and there were no ground-based navigational route aids en route. The investigation would like to say that from everything they gathered, the emergency response was very timely. The fact that the first responders managed to get to the site in about 2 hours was remarkable because the terrain has very steep slopes. It was raining, it was slippery. So it wasn't the easiest thing to do. When we went to the site, it was also raining and it was very slippery. And we struggled using sticks and everything to try to get up there. So looking at everything, we would say very confidently that the emergency response was very timely. The investigation determined that the accident was caused by the sudden loss of altitude and lift due to downdraft. This loss of altitude without change in power or pitch altitude is consistent with downdraft associated with changing environmental conditions over high terrain. In our findings also, we said there's limited national navigational capacity, a capability for en route and remote area weather services. We also looked at training and realized that the Air Force doesn't have much simulator training. We looked at flight monitoring and realized that there was no flight data monitoring also taking place. For flight following and tracking of aircrafts, we realized that it was also not there. There's no secondary surveillance radar, no automatic dependent surveillance broadcasts, or any other real-time tracking of aircraft. Our safety recommendations. There is a definite need to modernize the fleet of the Ghana Air Force. We have recommended that the Air Force acquire modern aircraft with terrain avoidance warning systems and modern navigation systems. That the aircraft should have cockpit voice recorders and flight data recorders, which are the audiovisual capable types. That the Air Force should invest in simulators for recurrent training. That they contract certified aviation weather provider or providers, and that Ghana as a nation should try to have en route navigational aids, especially in remote areas. The Air Force should seriously consider establishing flight data monitoring and en route tracking systems. And finally, we believe that they need to acquire ground support equipment, modernize what they have. In conclusion, the helicopter accident was an unfortunate and sudden weather-related accident. Implementing the safety recommendations will prevent the reoccurrence of future accidents. At this time, before I take any questions, I just want to give a few acknowledgements. I'd like to acknowledge the efforts and the support that the team had from the National Security Secretariat, led by the National Security Coordinator. It made what was a really difficult job for us much easier to do, and encouraged us to do and persevere to come up with these results. I'd like to say thank you also to the US team that joined us for a period of the investigation, the Chinese, for their warm welcome of us when we went to China for the decoding, and all the assistance that they gave us. They were very professional, and they worked with us and got us everything that we needed to be able to fully understand what happened. I'd also like to acknowledge the lead investigator, who in truth is not here today, Air Commodore Akron. He is on national duty outside, but he was the lead investigator and he worked really hard. I'd also like to acknowledge my mother organization, which is the Aircraft Accident and Incident Investigation Bureau, and its commissioner, Mr. John Wombati, for all the support he gave to us and the full availability of the AIB architecture to help us. And to the team that did this investigation, for their open-mindedness, their objectivity, their logic, their diligence and perseverance, and their dedication and commitment for over 2 months, working close to 7 days every day, sometimes from morning 9 till 9 at night, because we knew the country was hungry to know what had happened. And finally, to thank God for blessing us and giving us the fortitude, the mindset, and for guiding us to come up with this report, which we hope will bring closure to the families of our departed heroes and to the nation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Captain Fujo, for that comprehensive and detailed report. Well, at this stage, I would invite questions from members of the media present, so that any clarifications that are required are made before we leave. If you have a question, please take the microphone, identify yourself, the organization you work for, and ask it so that answers may be provided.
Good afternoon. My name is Maxwell. I work with Joy FM and Joy News. I know a lot of Ghanaians will be curious to know if the investigative committee listened to the audio recordings, of the helicopter. And I want to find out if indeed you listened, if it's possible to give us an idea of what happened in that moment. And then the second question, you talked about modernizing the fleet of the Ghana Armed Forces. I know right after the incident, there were calls to modernize the fleet, and this revelation is definitely going to reignite the calls, especially also coming on the back of recent discoveries about the presidential jet. I know there are investments, there are plans to inject $1 billion to retool the security agencies. As an expert, I want to find out how fast should we do this and which areas should we look at. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any other questions, please? Yeah, courage. Yeah.
Kamala Kulicha, I work at Media General. What was the sudden cause of the loss of altitude for the aircraft, and also the fact that there was postponement in the airworthiness of the helicopter? One, was there an understanding why the Ghana Air Force postponed the initial maintenance of the Z9, and what was the reason behind this?
Thank you very much. Any other questions, please? Okay, so Captain Fojo would answer these, after which we'll come back for another round of questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your questions. Yes, we listened to the CVR. We listened to it several times. And it is part of what informed us of what caused the accident. And for modernization of the fleet, we think it should be done immediately. Tomorrow is not fast enough. As soon as the country can afford and do it, we should do it, because it would help the Air Force with this core mandate, part of which is to fly dignitaries all over the country. And I think we owe it to ourselves as a nation to make sure that we have aircrafts fit for purpose, aircrafts that are of the highest technology, to make sure that everything is very, very safe. Yeah. To the sudden loss of altitude, I'm sure it was in one of the slides. When you're over rugged territory, that's over terrain, dependent on the steepness and so on and so forth, it's very easy to have turbulence. It's caused by eddies and rotors. It's an aviation phenomena, right? And you have updrafts, you have downdrafts. And even interestingly, even above the ridge, you can still have downdrafts coming. And it's a phenomena, it's an aviation phenomena that unfortunately, they fell into. They were very unfortunate, but it's a phenomenon that they fell into. And because there cannot be any other reason for that sudden loss of altitude for a plane climbing with power, with a pitch attitude, right? Because you see, the flight data recorder, to just help you understand the whole thing, the flight data recorder records the last 10 hours of a flight. The cockpit voice recorder records the last 2 hours of a flight. The flight data recorder, this particular one of this helicopter, records 93 parameters every second. The 93 parameters is made up of 48 analog parameters and 45 switch positions. So, looking at the flight data report, you know where all the switch positions are, you know what the height of the plane was, you know the exact position of, you know it time bound. So, what we are saying is from informed data. It's not that we've just conjectured something. We have the data, we've looked at it, and that is how come we've come with the conclusions we've come up with. I hope I've answered. Then the last one, the postponement of the maintenance. It's industrial practice, it's operational. In the airlines, it's done. Air Force doing it, there's nothing wrong with it. It's accepted practice. So there's nothing to it. I hope I've answered your question. Thank you.
Thank you very much. If there are any more questions, I'll take them now. Yeah.
My name is Abdul Hanan Adam. I work with the EIB network. Minister, I'd like to find out from the experts if there was any possibility for an emergency landing, and was there an avenue for them or the crew to consider that? Thank you.
Was there what? Please
an avenue.
Avenue, okay.
For the crew to
as in, was there a place nearby where
exactly
they okay.
for an emergency landing?
All right.
Good afternoon.
Yeah.
My name is Julius. I report for the Ghanaian Times. Sir, in your presentation, you mentioned that the helicopter was in a very good shape, but then they did not have what you called avionics safety requirements, additional avionics safety requirement. If they had, would it have assisted them to avoid this? And then outside of your report, there have been a lot of speculations about the final moments of the aircraft from eyewitnesses that it exploded, parts scattered all over the place. Could you address this for us, please? Thank you.
Thank you very much.
So I'm back again. If my memory could serve me right, I think the release by the Ghana Armed Forces just shortly after the announcement was made in this hall by the Chief of Staff did indicate that the heli went off the radar. But from the presentation, we are made to understand that there was no monitoring. I stand to be corrected though. How do we marry these two?
All right. Thank you very much. Is there another question, please? Okay, so Captain Fojo will take these questions here.
Thank you once again for your questions. I would like to presume that when you say emergency landing, you mean a diversion, because an emergency landing is when something goes wrong with the plane, because nothing ever went wrong with the plane. The decision to continue or to do an intermediate landing is the discretion of the captain. The captain was confident that he didn't need to do it. That is why he didn't do it. In terms of the additional avionics, right, I believe the question was if they had it, would it have prevented the accident? Was that the question? Okay. All I would say is it could have prevented the accident because it would have put the pilots in a better situational awareness mode. And it would have put them in a much better place to have taken decisions which could possibly have avoided this. But let's not kid ourselves. Let me just say something. What they went through is the sort of thing that even the best anywhere would have struggled to get out of, using what they were, with the limited instrumentation and so on that they had. The instrumentation, the instrumentation was fit for everything, but what we are saying is, I guess it's like saying that more meat never spoils the soup. It's, if you have all these other enhancements, it really helps. The Air Force the Air Force would be happy to have these enhancements because they know what it would help them do, and it would make our dignitaries and so on much safer when they fly. So that is why we are recommending that. But it doesn't mean that the fact that those enhancements were not there, that is why the accident happened. No, it would be wrong to say so. That would be too far-fetched. In terms of the explosion, there was no explosion before. You know, the Z9 helicopter, its fuel tank actually is under the where the passengers sit, right? So when it impacted, and don't forget, it was doing a flight to Obuasi and back. It wasn't going to refuel in Obuasi. So it had fueled up well. So on impact, that is when the explosion took place. We looked at all that. We looked at the corroboration. The time when, because you see, when there was the impact, when the explosion took place, don't forget, there were eyewitness accounts. So the eyewitness accounts tally with what we're saying. In terms of the helicopter going off radar, our radar systems in the country are just Accra, Kumasi. The routes they were flying, together with the height at which they were flying, it was very easy for them to go off radar. It's normal. Flight monitoring, which is what we're talking about, is different from being on a radar, right? Flight monitoring is knowing where your aircraft is at any time. It doesn't have to be on a radar screen. It can be through messages. That's why we said things like secondary surveillance, radar broadcasts, and so on and so forth, right? But it's a tracking system, okay, and it should be done for all Air Force aircraft. In fact, in the civil world, airlines, by law, have to track the aircraft. So what we're asking for is, we're not asking for the moon. It's something that must be done. I hope I've answered your questions. Thank you.
So if there are any final questions, we will take them. Otherwise, we call it a day. All right. So thank you very much for coming. And thanks to Captain Fojo and his team for delivering a comprehensive report, which, for all intents and purposes, should put to rest any doubts about the events of that fateful day. Thanks all. Thanks to you all for coming here.
We have seen for yet to our and some sona and sana ya bekono tofa bom kakra ya mpanyimfo nhwehwemu a wakoye kire se ewiemhyan no a eye helicopter na ekohwe ho e wo bofo dumpatam ho bra na mansoafo eni asa domo ya wonu kwa kodi dwuma wa santimantam ni nyina fa illegal mine ho kokakamuntum ye no wo nhwehwemu kakra wo ye ne se ewiem helicopter na nkasa edi enfie dubia wo se ye nsiesie wo ho saa ne bre no na aso but ne enye de to so mienu akade ne niema bi wo ho a na esese wo mu enya wo mu ye betumi aboa pilot ne crew ne wo mu no ama watumi asigina ya fei wonum se wonum a won kran ha senka ewiemhyan tu afrin kran ha no enka wo sempanyimfo etimi di wani di akire ehunu baabi awiemhyan no enam abreni abrebia bibia saa eni honom ye ni enu bi enti ekoma no ha adwen enti information no omuwo abra omutuo no aye kumase ese ewiemu enye kakra na nsampo anopa na ebetuo no omu delay kakra ansa na afedie omunya nte ese emuye eno ma omuso na between kumase ene nkran ha no de na ewo mu ne de na kyese enya de a obia de nani ehunu enti wono mo a de omunim de ene omunyansa nkakra na ewada won ho ese wode ekro ene se na kumase anopa no ensu agugu ewiemu nye kyese ewiemu ayekusu wo se omuo ehyen ni mu no omo aka se eduru baabi no mo so omuhunu efom afedie na kyese prekope no ewiemhye apagya ni mu a sɛdeɛ ne susu duro na hoɔden etuo no sɛdeɛ tie na afɛdeɛ prekope na kyerɛ wɔnom enhu hwe nti weda no na nya ade a ekoyie kora ne nyina nkamfua no wɔse niema bi wɔ hɔ no mu a wɔnom sɛ ne chichiw ne monitoring no sanse aban panyimfo de helicopter na so wɔn de du dwuma papa ohun ni bi de fɛ ne radar yi so a ebi ni hɔ ne nyina yɛ niema bi a wɔn susu sɛ sɛnka ne wɔ wiem hyɛn ni mu helicopter ni mu brɛ pagya ne ho so a ebia enkebetumi aso de esi ye na no anase bia ebetumi ama pilot ehunu se asemasi ana obentene ebi ekoso nti wahunu de ode na na mobefa saa niema no yenya ebeboa wo se yenim animu ye wo se ye ntam egya so na ye pe anya se be ha adwene afa so eniema ye akyekye kwan a se wiem hyen nam wiem obehunu se ahayiye ahanye no Ghana ntese oyi nkrani kumase ebi ni baabia ena nkrasi mia hodo a wiemhye no kofa nyina ebi ni ho enti ni nyina ye niema bi ha adwe ni nyina nkamfua no de omu hwehwe mu ene omu nkomodi omu di ye black box so se ho ahwan ye hwehwe mu nyina omu kobobo ni tie ye na kye se ewiemu ena na enye na so omu susu se na akade ne niema bi wo ho a nka betumi abo anse ntwofo mu bibisa se wo mu kɔ no ya wo hu se wiemu nye na ba bi ni ho mo betumi di wiemu hya na si na yewura no abetwem se eno de ya na wo pilot ne nsem ogine hu di se obetumi akɔ ana se wo suzu se minyina a wono ne betumi akye na wanyina ne de na kyese ogidi se na obetumi akɔ enti de akɔ wiemu ane se eye bad weather na ma de si ye ni nyina esi na yekɔ ensem foforo mu a Ghana Mampanyi John Dramani Mahama Elbon Tuansa yebeto aba no editu dwase wadi dwumadie bi afra ne nkokɔ nketenkete ebeba omanfo sere ya sesei de eje ba eje nya bedru nyame yadom ochena ochese wode dwumadie no edi ye wo asante mantamu asante mampon na wokopa nkokɔ nketenkete ho entoma
President Mahama say, I feel a importation of a poultry. Emma, your dollar no 8 million 1 year. Or one man who to project net in the now. About 1 man with here to my dollar was saying now what days from home. And don't you know, well, you're table and I know never who caught that war launch. Who caught down your launch here? The ambassador was a maybe. Never got very so a launch here, Ramanti, and to what I better cut the chunk of corner was a president, something of general duty park. Well, I'm my better catch up on you. This street, Diano, Yama, Konya, who are a few, our young couple can travel or pay who could money a day as I say, who could this one? You bet Mamma up to 50 for free and wow, you go free. Now, now they are here. And the registration, no, Adama assemblies, no. That's my Bolivia, I am ready. We are never informed. So, I saw my young Bukana, I saw you, and one and this. One of the yard down, to buy the one and this. The number up to 50. Now, me, I don't want per person. And the estimate is I never district to be 81 between 100 and 200. No one now or Mokopa, Saturday, no infrastructure, by assembly, I mean, and I am the same laptops you call outside your back with your photocopy assembly. Name a very sensitive, and it was a carbon debate, Nina, and a carbon thing, and a so far so good, and Odo cameras to our home said minister by our boy Abaso, Nanano boy Abaso, within the first 100 days, you know, assembly, a building, yet my come within the first 100 days, you know, many contractor, the best I would be, advertise with daily, you have to pass through the law. And to advertise, we are a year tender now for the financial multi-million award contract, and I am contractors, you know, many project, you know, chips compound, a baby, maintain him, a baby, or safe room,
uncompleted one over 13 years ago. Aframano, Sekwa, Aton Soja, and also Sina capture a baby. Yes, it's in a classroom, Tia Hamadia, Yamambo, and also clarify as legacy project, the baby, Kufas Abubakar Islamic, primary, and also since Oshama time 2008, Akawa Abepemone, and also Sunina, the baby.
Trade Minister Apa Onipansia Sewameye Board of Directors Emma Ghana International Trade Commission.
This board, appointed by His Excellency the President, brings together diverse expertise in economics, international marketing, law, and industry experience. Your role will be pivotal in guiding the operations of the Commission towards building resilient value chains, supporting domestic and fostering an environment conducive to both local and foreign investment. As you take this responsibility, I encourage you to uphold the principles of fairness and transparency while safeguarding Ghana's development, international trade negotiation and practices. You are to ensure that the GITC becomes a beacon of excellence in trade regulation, helping to unlock new opportunities for growth, employment and sustainable development for our nation. I entreat you to support the head of GITC so that together you can excel, make a mark, make an impact. I know some of you were part of the promulgation of this law, and so you know it inside out, and we expect that the expertise you bring to bear will be very phenomenal. Congratulations once again, and I hope that you'll be able to excel. Thank you very much.
We will do our very best to try to live up to the responsibility that has been thrust upon us. The sweetness of the pudding is in the eating. So we should not, I don't think it is appropriate to say too much about what we are going to be doing. I know that given the changes that are occurring in the international arena, we are going to be facing some challenges in this area. When the GITC law was being passed, almost everybody in the world agreed that we shall all operate under the WTO rules. But recently, we can see what is happening across the world. Some countries have ignored, some are even declared that they will leave the WTO, even though they were the very ones who were behind the setting up of the WTO. So we are going to be facing some headwinds along the way. But I know, and I have confidence that with you as the minister and His Excellency behind us, we shall succeed.
National Teaching Council aye workshop bi ne no na so afo hwe ngumasua ho nsem so akokasa wasese o man ngumasua no ebeye yi a ebehia ma se teacherfo no ye be masika ene ntete mapa akọ mu.
Your 5-day meeting here means a lot for us in Ghana, so that you provide enough adequate standards that strengthens the regulation, in particular the relationship between the teacher and the people, and the teacher and the teacher, and then the teacher and other stakeholders like the community. President Mahama assumed office barely 11 months ago, and he's resetting our educational landscape.
Oshe enshemu ye koso ya amaya hodo ensia ena ya babisia ha betwindwene teacher for eyedie ho ente se ekwan ya teacher for bayire omo aye omo adwuma yie na ama ngumasumi atime atumpon te wo hwa yese capacity building and regional competency training program NEA. This is competency program the tia ne se ye boa ekwan ye be fa so a wetimi aboboa ye ho ano na ya boa a teacher for na omoso nimdie na brebia akonanim ewiase ye we nsisa ye ba ngumasua mu ada de ba chi bia
said the Honorable Minister Kai, no, Sayana Ebano, a crime by neighbor for so my teacher for so who says, I will have to also said by our professional development or Honomoa or say Utimico, no Kojin, the can in India, na Utimicon in him. Sandy man is a near bread and then teacher any Honomoa, what the laptop man is saying, I say, own be crana, own to me.
The issue is, and the good thing about it, and the challenges are common almost all over Africa. How can we improve the status of our teachers' well-being? How can we build their capacity? How can we keep them on par with what is happening around the globe? How can they be supported in terms of, we agree, capacity building, in terms of financial support, in terms of their well-being? How can we make sure that a teacher from Africa can represent us anywhere in every part of the world? That's the challenge we have, and I'm sure with us as Africans being together, we can make this thing work.
Yeah, we say for ya to and seven so for abedi achire ya wo hwe akwantempon ho nsam so ene ya tentwe die ewonsuo so ewiem e de atu edwase emma ebra so se ye de ye ho ehye maritime security ehu ginesi ahodo nyina so e wo se ye so ya no bini mu bia ye nten nakra.
Piracy in the Gulf of Guinea has been troublesome, but Nigeria took a very positive step by passing legislation to combat piracy and maritime offenses, and that's called the SPOMO Act, Suppression of Piracy and Other Maritime Offenses. So that act was passed in 2019, and with the passing of that act, there existed now a legislation to arrest the situation. And once that came into play, then for us in Nigeria, we can say like that piracy and other maritime offenses has become something like part of our history, a history that is past, in the sense that we have addressed it, and then now we are moving forward.
Yeah, you say Gulf of Guinea, no. There were problems with piracy, illegal trafficking, bunkering, and your friends say illegal fishing. Nyama bebre ekoswa enye enkoso ye emma countries within the region. Enti yeshia wa ha no. Ye behwe nea omaye, nea wo say ye said ye be ya ye kwa yenso emma na omahia wa ha omufi amanoni. Me can abanimuno. Then I was say ye. Then I was say countries no ana ye be resolve a problem na ye mine etumpong.
For us, it's very important that the industry is efficient, that we can, by using the seafaring and the shipping industry to promote globalization and international trade. But we also believe in gender equality, and we believe in equal opportunities for men and for women. And that goes for all industries and also in the shipping industry.
Ebruhini otubo jankwasi ya otoso mienu ono asuso na eye ohene a wo ye akuapema donten hene na de atodwa se se wosre emwa wokeka ne nsase ne manfo pese wonum si biaye a wonum anya yasa abo mu yade eye kidney yade no ye betumi ahwe wonum center kese wo ho afei eni biaye ebehwe eni nsoso ne manfo no ehia bi papapa sawe ene wotutu ho anamonti ankrankra biara eduru wasom no wo so betumi abeboa nananom ewa anamontu a wotu ehu
adesina wo ye wo kropon wo ye wo mampon wo ye wo bosumase abotachi ne ade nyina nyansa adonteman aduye nso yenso ye enyemenko me mankrado ye ahemfo na wo me honu nyina no obi afini dia se a obi aye na mo media no na se ekramas the whole program no ye manity through and yesu wo ho tramo no adoso na me trenegoma ne amekan makan wie abofra na okofie no eye wo awofo no obia na obema no wasede se okwakoda obehwe se obada na wo fia obehwe se oba wo fia na uhu ba obehwe no no wahi se nuru bi wo hokra na uhu wodi gubite simni ade na wode ma mofra no na enom emwa bena eri asi yen ni susese no yenkom clinic no yepese ye senior department bia yebenya bi ewo ho ye kanu ayare a ye say dialysis no mun ade abeba so ni ade ye yare bono ni nyina ye MP aba ma wire sem se obabu a na yaye nti eno no ye risi yen eni fi afi se putu djuma e ho a esiye mato brocks ye was cement ye was sand ye was chippings a ye be djuma ni nyina nti ye hwe se ogwira yi mu ye be du be fida no ye betuma cut out officially na free ye fi djuma di na se enti mema fu nyina afrika pa
na ni anana kan eye brebo yare no eye kidney yare eye adipsis so okọ hospital okọ no ko sala e mbinu so no san ba fie eni nti nana sa asemi e na wodi atufie he mejina menanso abo aban mpeyefo pun health minister yene na na te parliament e be ko ne na ase eye omampanyine ne Mahama Kesa odia bay eye adibia e ba beboa yarewa etena yen so eche eni nti eno so mekun won na me no aka ene won penfo anana worry fi Canada e ba beboa aka abo na ye make sure say ye best dialysis center e wo kom clinic na me je di say afedanti say
Adishia wo Atlas Hill yeah wo ga Central Municipal so e de adesre atompanyufo anim se won mo kwan e wo mpotem ho no enyiko yie kra
Our humble request is to collaborate, and we therefore respectfully and urgently request the following people. Sure. Honorable Linda Okru, Delta Regional Minister, Manenko, to provide crucial and coordination and oversight for the Atlas Hills community. We are calling upon Honorable Kwame Governor Abuja to ensure the immediate inclusion of Atlas Hills in the ongoing urban road development program. Additionally, we are calling upon the urban roads to conduct an urgent, when I say urgent, urgent in red ink. Everybody say urgent engineering assessment, survey and design the necessary road infrastructure. How can we be in a kind of water? We will die. But we are not ready to die now.
Yetwaso eko onawu ni lamte Vanderpoint National Drip Coordinator. Enfidia abaidia basa yemfensie kwan a atete apansamuno yate humpinti kwanante hwa yensanka nempo ye bisasa eyeyen na wo se ye tofamu edigu enfidia de mu ansana ababe siesie monchimon kwani ekwan a atete apansam ana
ye kwanye Langard for edge insase ewo ha o de fan se we fi adwuma ba o be rew fie no ohu se yetu amna wo gate ano ehe na wo be fa dia ko fie
won pa fai keje market ke ba bi ene gbeje gbakoni jeke si wo gbe ehin ewo lole fe ni sana e 1 cedi abake 3 cedi ya mi si eso na wo se mi si fil kwan so na me nante mekunu ekita akwala no meniama bo mebo enti abusuafo mu ya mabo na ma ya wa ha ya bra omu ko from kra omu nko omu se kwa ne nye ye duru ye mi sister ko nyankopon ye nadoma owu ye obai ye bedru market ye taxi kra odi ye beba fie kra o se kwa ne nye enti on timi ngba aya no kra su ensu otusu to a ende ha de nya kra
palasa hanum yanzu ye kan oman no na ye ko no ye ba ye tibia no anam se kwa no nyenti ye tumi mfa apasnya fo na mba nanso de tibia no abampen for o mon kasamaya na yanso ye yentu ye kwan ye
me fa taxi drop me fit Accra ba ha ye give me 1.5 ye ban so a ye fa me nkofie na ye me egu ha banchi bottom me nu omo mesua ne nyina de akọ ebi wa ahomachi me bedu wa 4 ye be ye mia ye babo 6 na me nsua ne ma ne wie ye an robes su gu kwan nu so nti me wo hoi me kokro mu anaju na makodi dwa
the head reparation no ni lapteva dampoy the ono say Ministry of Road and Transport no ono so ho bi me ya fosu ye frɛ me didi ya ofosu me free Asante Achem Central ho na me free me ye Central Youth wo ho na masa ba ye Central Youth wo ha biem eti ye se obi biala say ya wate ye ne ya no nkoboro so mo tie nka free UTV a ma obo ga jira say agro bi de yedi wo ha
Atandromo ewo Achimansa district ewo Pue Mantem won so che se wo hia chip compound sanse wo yade a otwa kwan ansa na wakonya baabi ase ho yade
ye bre bi wa first no na moto ni ho ka ni ho ye nante bi wo ha emo ye din a ye di ayi epon besi ho na ye de wato so ni achichire ni asoa Fana ye bekwa akopɛ ka ye bekɔ ka kwan ho akonya ka na ye de wakɔ hospital na se de moto abadie ana se so ya ka so eba ha kakrakaka bi wo ho ani Africa na waba so ha ye pese mo be ye clinic no emaye ni enso so ha no eto ntwa maye nkakra
ebi ho na wo kan o timi nantin so ye nyaka na moto nsu ni ho anti se si a moto abai die enu na ya ebo ye kata enso na ye bre
clinic ni ha pa ni se maybe awo kan me na ye ko pe ka se kwan ye ndo nko na abobo ya na de bi ko ndo ye ko na nko wo abobo ya no kwan the clinic ni ha de mo ye kra nti mo ye
evra mako wo miku mese na ko wo ene ni do yiribi asana yenya ye clinic ni de yesre mo ye na enya wa ebeboy
mi ankasa me wa yirebi ene ye de opemfo e de to tricycle mu anane amofre na bobo ya no awo aka no a moja etu no na atenuom ho no mo ye ni chip compound e wo ho ne ye de ni free ho no ma ansa ne ye de ne ba ayirebi ebi sense biem ema obi okwafuo mu owo ka no na ye de ni free atenuom a ye de ni bedru baby a hospital wo no na wawu enu na motivate me because I was part of it me hu ye na eseme na me ka kire nyame se odi yensi baby yi a ekuro bi te sa atenom ye first yi a ye be ye no ye de chip compound beba beko ho na ya momo opportunity a ombetimi omuso betimi access healthcare ansa na ebie mu ye den kra na wo se ye de omko akira ye de omako akire enu na motivate yen ti a ye de health center eko atenom enye normal chip compound the agency of the project no enu nti ni aye ne 6 months na contractor no so ahye ye bo say sa time frame no so no obetimi de aye adwuma enti we are looking at 6 months na onye very good and diligent job na fe on hand over to the health authorities e wa Achimansa na yenso yemfama homa for no na fe omo ntimi fa nya adwuma Asida PSC Nkoma Clothing Palace or share matade mpacho otomanta ade nko a owo Accra Central wadaroma wonom any lava abrosan no ene di nhwani mu frɛ no 0271998313 so wonsa beka wonom ema ho ade bia obenya bi wo hosa so ena na nafia safo ene style limit wobetumi afrɛ no 0551106383 so mi ambeso mo awie Midday de ama saponkuma nkoma jesi ada production crew ni nyina ase amammo ene hwa yejeme ahenawa